Welcome back, everyone, to Voices in AI. Joe here with my good pal Eldad. And today we're going to be talking about one of my favorite AI voices, actually, Joy Buolamwini. I screwed up the first name. Let me start, the easy one. Let me start again.
No, man, you should keep that. That's great. That's
J.
so authentic. I can't say joy, but Buolamwini. That's
Buolamwini, I got
good.
down. Okay, well, one of my favorite voices in AI, Joy Buolamwini. She's been at it for a little while. She's been talking about AI before it was cool, for sure. It has a pretty interesting backstory. She is a combo American, Canadian, Ghanaian who was interested in technology and AI since the very beginning. I think she was inspired by the robot Kismet in MIT originally, and she went to school. She studied computer science, but she's very much like an artist at heart. She actually currently refers to herself as computer scientist poet or something like that.
Which is,
So she really likes blending the media, arts, and the sciences, and eventually found her way to MIT, the place that kind of inspired her to do her master's and PhD degree. I think actually at the MIT Media Lab. And while there, her and a woman somewhere else, Timnit Gebru, who we'll talk about eventually, was an ethicist at Google for a while until there was a falling out there, and she is currently doing a lot of work in the same space. But what Joy worked on when she was in college and moving forward was really bias in AI. What she was finding is that in particular, facial recognition technology is a lot more forgiving to, well, first off, white men like ourselves, and then white women, but any faces of color, it had a much more difficult time actually being able to use that information and misidentifying. We saw an example of this early on with Google's facial recognition technology, which mimics a lot of what we're seeing today with their image generator, which is that when you showed it a man's face that was black, it would not identify them as a black man, but it would actually identify them as a gorilla. And so there was quite a bit of backlash there. And this is really like a great moment in terms of solidifying, crystallizing the work that Joy has been dedicated to over the years, which is both identifying how bias shows up in these AI technologies and also what we can do about it. She's doing a lot of stuff in research, but she runs the Algorithmic Justice League, which is a nonprofit very much focused on these
Timnit
problems around
Gebru is
bias.
still is part of that as well, if I remember
She
correctly.
has her own too, called, I remember the acronym, it's DAIR, DAIR, but I'm forgetting what it stands for off
Sounds
the
like
top of my
gotcha.
head right now.
Yeah, no, Joy's very interesting. Anybody who's gone to Georgia Tech to study computer science or engineering, one of the top schools in the U.S., and then she goes on to Oxford to earn 2 degrees, if I remember there, and then she does the MIT thing. And MIT, I imagine for her, has got a mixed bag, right? Because obviously she's gained her claim for fame in many respects from the research she did at that point at MIT Media Labs and the facial bias that she has nicknamed the coded gaze, right? And as she will put it in the links, has in a talk with Sam Altman, it starts at the California Commonwealth Club. She says, we've all heard about the white man's gaze and, the colonial gaze, and what is the coded gaze is this inability of the AI to recognize her face. And she literally happened to be wearing a white mask for Halloween, and when she would put it on, it would get recognized. She one of the things that was somewhat fascinating is she drew a face on her hand, and it got recognized. And then she put her own face, it didn't get recognized. Obviously, very irksome,
Yeah.
and led to this mission that she's been on for a number of years. What I think is also more prevalent and is not recognized is she is, during that period of time that she was trying to raise this in the early 2018, 2019, if I remember my dates correctly, she was basically also looking at big companies. Amazon and some other ones were trying to sell facial recognition software to the US government. And she really was, and a lot of people have called this out in general, there is something that is like data colonialism. A wonderful term, man. And you can see that is happening, right? These massive companies like OpenAI, potentially Anthropic, and anybody else who's ingesting this amount of data is creating a race which is something that we'll talk about when we get to Sam Harris, another person that was an important voice in the AI industry. But she was calling out Amazon for the flaws in its software and warning the government not to purchase. And Amazon had some very senior people call her out publicly and say, no, your research is wrong. And really, she felt that she and the undergrad student that she was working with were really put at risk. And she got a lot of external support. Timnit Gebru and Yoshua Benuga. Yeah, Bengio, thank you. But MIT Media Lab itself, she says, was pretty disappointing. While she's very much connected, you do a Google search, it's MIT Media Lab's pretty prominent there, and they still have her page up trying to recruit others. I would wonder what her feelings are about her time there after all this.
Yeah, I'm sure a little good, a little bad.
Yeah, like any job, right?
Yeah, but there was actually a documentary that came out. I think it's still on Netflix.
It is, 2020.
The Coded Bias, where I would highly recommend it. It's pretty quick. It's an hour and a half, and it's really good. It goes through all this stuff and how this has all evolved and the science behind it. But she, like we said, it's been 6 years, let's say 2018-ish, that this was like being talked about. I'm talking about this for 6 years, and it's not until really like now that we're starting to see the AI things become much more mainstream that this conversation is really picking up steam in a very visceral way. Speaking of Google again, at the time of recording this, they're dealing with the backlash that they have from their image generator, where people would ask it to give me a picture of a pope, and it would be a black pope, even though there's never been a black pope, or give me a picture of a Nazi, and it would be a black Nazi. There were not any black Nazis. It's like there is a coded bias in all of this technology, and we're still pushing forward with it despite that, without really considering the risks involved with that. There's also a recent paper that came out actually too, where if you're using coded language with a large language model, something that a potentially black person might be more likely to say in a certain vernacular or dialect, and then you ask them to give judgment on them in some way, pretend we're in like a court scenario, the LLM is much more likely to hand out like a death sentence to this person just because of that. There was the famous case, Compass, I forget what it stands for, but they were using AI to determine whether or not the recidivism rate would be for certain folks. And of course, like, just by having the race, even if it was significantly less likely, like it was obvious, it was like holding weed versus a gun charge, it would still
lean towards saying that.
Yeah, if you're a person of color, you have you're a lot more likely to have a recidivism rate. So these are all things that are going on right now, and I'm sure it's probably a little bit frustrating to people like Troy. It's like, I've been talking about this for years, and we're still not dealing with it.
Yeah. It is amazing. We were joking just a bit before. Academics, right, can write about a niche subject and for years, and because they're going down that path of exploration and deep exploration. This seems pretty obvious, right?
Now it does.
No, but even back then, if it's not happening, maybe there wasn't the technological means, as well as the fact that people are like, you know what, not impacting that many people or whatever, right?
Or just not impacting me, right?
Yes,
if the majority is going to be Caucasian, it doesn't really impact me, so I don't care.
Absolutely. And it goes back to the catalytic converter, right? That huge court case with the automobiles, right? That they said, oh, you know what? Yeah, it might kill some people, but to remove it's going to cost us more than what the actual payouts from those court cases would be.
The incentives are off.
Yeah, absolutely. And, everything that we're talking about obviously is a draining thing. And imagine doing your PhD and battling Amazon and going to congressional testimonials and just to show you the character of this woman, both as her strength in doing all that. But she had to write to MIT and say, hey, I'm thinking of dropping out. I need a mental health break. Exhaustion, basically. You tell me why I should get this 4th degree. What is its value? And she was half in jest, but saying she would want to go pick up skateboarding and try to compete in the Olympics for Ghana. So you can see that there's definitely this bright personality and so forth, behind this kind of very scientific mind.
She's stylish as hell too. If you
Yeah.
watch the documentary or any videos she's in, she's always styling. And yeah, she refers to herself as a poet of code. That's what it is.
Yes, yeah. She actually has a website, Poet of Code, and I think on there, if I remember correctly, there's some new book that she's publishing or some
Yeah,
sort.
yeah. Unmasking AI. She recently
Yes.
published it, which again is like essentially what she's been talking about for years, but condensed into a book. And yeah, I haven't. It's on my very long reading list to
Yeah.
get to.
Nice.
But it's interesting though because you brought up Sam Harris, who we're going to be talking about next. There is this divide in the AI safety community here, between two very different but two very serious impacts of AI. One which we've talked about with Joy, which is the impact of bias on folks, and the other is existential risk, which is AI ends up in some way ending the world essentially. And so they're both coming at this from a safety perspective, but there is this different level of urgency and impact. And there's this battle within the AI safety community where there's people like Joy or Timnit or others who are like, no, we need to be dealing with bias. We need to be dealing with misinformation. We need to be dealing with AI porn, essentially, and like the impacts of this stuff on us right now. And then you have this other side, which is AI could very well end the world. And so we need to be making sure we're putting a lot of thought and resources into stopping that from happening. Now, unfortunately, this creates a competitive landscape, a zero-sum game where there's only so much money to go around. And where are we going to put that money in terms of the research? And so we have one side that's, no, we need to be fighting bias, misinformation, blah, blah, blah. And one side that's saying, no, there's existential risk. The unfortunate thing right now is that, or maybe not unfortunate, we'll see in the future, but there's a lot more money going to the existential risk, which is a lot vaguer at this point in time, because
Yes.
that is where the people who have the money are more concerned about over the bias and misinformation. And so we're starting to see that influence the policy and the research as well, because that's what's going to get the grants money.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it's hyper important. And when money gets divided like that, we unfortunately how the world works. Money will drive a lot of things and so forth. But my fear for somebody who's as bright, both intellectually and as you can tell, we're fans of her personality, Dr. Joy Buolamwini, is that she is going to get not pigeonholed, but classified as this kind of just a voice that is causing chaos. And yeah, and there's a hard reality here, right? I think one of the things that I really liked about this woman is, and I really enjoy when we bring in people of color or women, not what you would assume is your normal biased right view of a computer scientist and AI kind of background. Is it's known through research that African women can be seen as much more combative because they're more expressive, they're more honest and transparent in how they present their information. And I would hope that the world sees well past that because she's an important voice. And what she's raising is critical, especially when you consider the majority of the world is not white. And how is AI going to develop for us? As in that reality is critically important.
Being developed for and who is being left behind are very big questions, which we at the moment have the answer to. And the answer is not, I think, the one that we would prefer at the moment. But I'm hopeful that missteps like what Google has made and which will be made and have been made by others will create some pressure, hopefully, to change that. And I hope that voices like Joy's don't get pushed aside as, oh, here's another angry black woman. You go off and do your thing over
Or your
there.
threat about bias is not as critical as the end of humanity.
Yeah.
Because bias is not, unfortunately, it is part of humanity and unconscious bias and so forth. That's not, for the majority of the people in the world, I would hope that's not how they want the world.
Yeah, it's a lot easier to motivate people when they think their life is going to end versus something that is not explicit, that isn't implicit, that isn't so like potentially right in front of your face. Yeah. It's harder to make the argument for the more pressing concern if it isn't impacting me directly.
Very true. I think that's a good note to close on.
Yeah, check Joy out. She's a pleasure to listen to, and check
We'll
out her
put
book
some
too, I'd say.
links. Yeah, we'll put some links, especially to that Netflix and some of the other places you can find her stuff. And enjoy meeting Dr. Joy Buolamwini.
Thanks, Eldad.